Good morning, and can I welcome you to this meeting of Adults Select Committee. We have a number of people who will be introducing themselves shortly, but I would like to extend at this stage a particular welcome to Wendy Barnard, who is our new clerk. And if Wendy does this work anything like as well as I've seen her support governing bodies over the years, we are going indeed to be a lucky committee. So welcome, Wendy. I'd like then to ask people to introduce themselves. This is partly for the benefit of those of us in the chamber, but particularly for the benefit of those people who I hope are watching us live, so that they understand that when you come in later and speak, they know who you are. So I'm going to begin by asking the Vice Chairman to introduce himself.
County Councillor Roger Harris, Castleton Ward, Vice Chairman, as the Chairman has just said.
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny.
Wendy Barnard, Democratic Services.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Martine Sowry, Financial Inclusion Officer for Monmouthshire Council.
I'm Ian Bakel, I'm the Housing and Communities Manager for the Council.
I'm Sue Harris, I'm the Local Partnership Manager for Newport and Monmouthshire from the Department for Work and Pensions.
Richard Davis, I'm Head of the Shared Benefits Service covering Monmouthshire and Torvine.
Sarah Masterton, taking over the Local Partnership Manager role for Newport and Monmouthshire from Sue Harris.
Mark Hand, Head of Planning, Housing and Place Shaping for Monmouthshire.
I'm Ruth Donovan, Assistant Head of Finance.
County Councillor Ralph Chapman, Member for Mardy and Member of this committee.
County Councillor Alan Wintle, Member for Drybridge Monmouth, Member of the committee.
Delia Hudson, Chairman of the Abergavenny Action 50 Plus.
County Councillor Penny Jones, Member of Raglan Ward and Member of this committee.
County Councillor Martin Hickman, Member for Lumfoist Fowler Ward and Member of this committee.
County Councillor Paul Jordan, Cantreford Abergavenny, Member of this committee.
County Councillor Val Smith, Observing.
Tyrone Stokes, Finance Manager for Social Care and Health.
Thank you. And I'm Councillor Peter Farley for St Mary's Ward, Chepstow, Chair of the committee. That was jolly well done. I feel a little bit like that reporter on the Ark Royal or whatever it was in the Falklands, who counted them all out and counted them all back in again. For the benefit of those who've not been to the chamber before, the microphones are to a certain extent flexible and can be angled towards you to make sure you can be heard. And there are one or two, I'm not sure on this occasion whether it's the one that Councillor Smith's got, there are one or two that work but don't light up. But assume that they do when you press the button, and they will also then bring the cameras to you, or should do. Okay? Excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any apologies for absence, please, Wendy?
Yes, there's apologies for absence from County Councillor Ruth Edwards and also from Mr David Hill.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest at this stage that members would wish to make? Councillor Wintle.
Yes, I'm a Director of MHA.
We note
it's non-prejudicial.
We note that. We understand it's non-prejudicial, so you will be obviously taking a full part in the proceedings. But for the avoidance of doubt, you have made that declaration and you will sign the appropriate form if you haven't already done so. Thank you, Councillor Wintle. Any other declarations of interest at this stage? With regard to declarations of interest generally, can I propose, as we usually do, that we take them as and when, if you support that? And then that means that if discussion takes a certain turn and somebody wishes to say something about an interest, they still have the opportunity to do so, and we'll make that at the time. Are we comfortable with that? Thank you. Our next item on the agenda number 3, public open forum. Again, for those not familiar with our meetings, we always have an opportunity on the agenda for members of the public to raise issues either in advance or on the day. I'm not aware of any for today, Hazel. So we can then proceed to item 4. And item 4 is just to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting. The previous meeting in question is in your agenda pack, and it's for the meeting of this committee held on Tuesday, the 12th of July. It's quite a way back by now, but if there are any matters of accuracy on the first page, I'd like to raise one, and I don't think this is uncommon with any of the committees. Could I ask, for the sake of clarity, that we make a distinction between our councillor members and our co-opted members? Our co-opted members have their own status in the meetings and need to be recorded as such. So, for example, the list of those present on the 12th of July is slightly confusing. It's perfectly possible for somebody who knows Delia to see this, it's a public document, and to come and congratulate you on your election. And as far as we know, that has not yet happened. It's a small point, but perhaps, Wendy, you could bear that in mind. And I know you didn't do these for future meetings. Any items of accuracy, please, on page 2, on page 3, on page 4, and on page 5. Thank you very much. So those, and on page 6. So I will sign those at the end, and those of you who have studied the minutes, as I know you have, will be aware that quite a lot of what we've touched on there is picked up in today's agenda. That then brings me to item 5 of this morning's agenda, and I'd like to ask Hazel, who has worked with our witnesses and with members of the committee to put the programme together, to give us a quick overview of the rationale for why these items and why they are all essentially linked.
Thanks, Chair. Today's meeting, we want to discuss welfare reform and the discretionary housing payments policy. In order for you to actually do pre-decision scrutiny of the policy, we felt it was important to actually have an update of the welfare changes, because it's been at least a year and a half since you last scrutinised this. So the agenda is likely to overlap in terms of some of the discussion, but we've structured it in such a way that that will be helpful. So we'd like to ask that Sue Harris from the DWP provides an overview of the welfare reform changes before we move on to asking Michelle Morgan to discuss with us the impact of discretionary housing payments in preventing homelessness. So I believe that Michelle will talk to you about some case studies in terms of the impacts on their clients. And we'd like to then invite Richard to give us an update on the impact of the benefit changes in Monmouthshire specifically, before we scrutinise the discretionary housing payments policy. And then finally, we'll round off with a discussion with Ian and Martine on the financial inclusion service that's based within Ian's area. So we tend to sort of allow discussion to move between the items on the agenda, but hopefully if we can do so in that order, you'll have the necessary context to understand the actual policy before we scrutinise that.
Thank you, Hazel. Is everybody comfortable with that? And are our guests comfortable with that? Yes? Okay.
Just the presentation with
Ian, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you for inviting me here to talk to you today. I'll just give you a little bit of an update on universal credit first, and then we'll move on to benefit cap and some other changes that are going to be happening. Okay, so universal credit was launched in April 2013, and since then it's available in all job centres now throughout the country, and there are currently around about the 280,000 people claiming in receipt of universal credit. In this area, as you know, at the moment we haven't gone for the full rollout. We've just got single non-homeowners in Monmouthshire who are claiming universal credit. In many other areas in the country, the full rollout has happened and is working successfully. Obviously, alongside the rollout of universal credit, we have the various other welfare reform things that have been taking place. And, what we want to do is develop a more personalised and improved service for everybody. So, and in actual fact, for the people that find work under the old existing benefits, for every 100 people who found work under job seekers allowance, there are actually 113 claimants who are moving into work. So, things are improving. In addition, as I say, to the recent welfare reforms and UC, there are some changes now which are going to be taking place. And that is the removing of the higher rate of the child element for the first child under universal credit. What's happened, or what's been happening, is that with children with parents who are claiming universal credit, the first child, there was a higher rate payment, and then any subsequent children had a lower level payment. That higher rate is being removed and from April 2017, and will be replaced, as I say, that all the children will receive the same amount. So that will be applied to newborn children from April 2017. So new claims then from families with more than 2 children will be directed back to tax credits. Now, the reason for this is because they want to make sure that the system is working properly and will cope with it. The analogy that we were given for this was something like, somebody's building a 3-bedroom house, the plans have been passed, they're halfway up with the property, and all of a sudden there's a change thrown in and they want a 5-bedroomed house. So they're having to juggle these things, and not wanting universal credit platform to crash, they've decided to put it on hold for a while and make sure that it's right before they carry on. So for any existing claims will stay on universal credit, but any new claims for families with 2 or more children will be directed back to tax credits, so existing benefits, until November 2018, when that will start then to go back through to universal credit. As well as that then, obviously the managed moves of existing benefit claims to universal credit has now been delayed, and that won't start until July 2019 and will be completed in March 2022. So as you can see, we were expecting in this area to roll out to full UC later this year. That now won't be happening. It's been delayed. So there we are. They are going to continue the rollout of the full UC service in 5 job centres a month from June 2017. So as you can see, things have really slowed down in the rollout, but that's because they want to make sure that they get the system working properly and that it can cope with the numbers. So that's that part of it. Now, obviously, I'm sure you'll all be interested in benefit cap, because that is now one of the big issues within the welfare reforms. So currently, benefit has been capped at £26,000 a year for single parents and coupled household, and £18,200 for single people. Now that is changing in November. That's going down to £20,000 a year for couples, and 13,500 for single people living in their own accommodation. The rates are slightly higher in the London area. Okay. Approximately 88,000 households will be affected by the benefit cap changes nationally in 2016-17, and that's in the full first year of the cap changes. Monmouthshire, there will be around, I believe, 90 cases, and Torvine, probably the same, 160. So yeah. So more people obviously are affected this time than they were last time. There are exemptions to the benefit cap, and some of those exemptions are people who are on working tax credits, personal independent payments, attendance allowance, and a number of other things. When the figures come out, we've already had one scan. Oh, sorry, did you want to? Oh, sorry. We've already had one scan, and that has gone out to the local authorities. We have been working with the local authorities to discuss what support they're going to be offering and what support we can give to the people affected by the benefit cap.
Did you say Monmouthshire, was it 90?
Yeah.
Yes, 90, yes.
160.
Yeah. Okay. So people have been contacted, and a lot of people have refused help from ourselves, and the local authority are now doing visits. Yeah. Yes, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick this up when I go. But we are doing a very detailed project to visit each of these households, because they've got very, although at the outside it might appear that they've got a high level of benefits, more often than not they've got 3 or more children. More often than not they're single parent families, so they've got quite complex circumstances that we have to work through with them. What we're trying to do is to put in place all necessary support so that they can begin to look at how they can change their household finances.
So the stage that we're at the moment is that a second scan has been completed now, and that has gone to the local authorities. Our offices are working through those scans and cleansing it to make sure that anybody who should be exempt is removed, and we will then, everybody will have received a letter, and that gives them the opportunity to contact the department and ask for a voluntary appointment. Now, anybody who's claiming job seekers allowance, if they're coming into the job centre, and they will be on a regular basis, we will be having discussions with them about benefit cap. For people who don't have to come in for mandatory appointments, as I said, you know, they've got an opportunity to ring and make a voluntary appointment. If they don't do that, after a period of time, we will make 3 attempts to contact them and offer them a voluntary appointment to discuss how we can support them with the benefit cap changes. Now, obviously, you know, if we're unable to contact them, we can't do any more than that unless they come to us. The second letters which have gone out to them now do have an amount of money in them which will tell them between a 50 and £100 how much they will be affected by. It doesn't give them an exact figure, but it will be an amount between those, the amounts in the letter. Evaluation of the initial benefit cap showed us that households were 41% more likely to go into work than if they hadn't been capped. In London, it was 70% more likely for them to go into work if they hadn't been benefit capped. So the timeline, I'll just run through the timeline for this second stage now of the benefit cap. We commenced in the 5th of September. The second scans were issued to the local authorities. Between the 19th now and the 30th of September, they will all be receiving letters. The people affected will be receiving letters letting them know within that band how much they're going to be affected. The 3rd of October, carers allowance people will be notified by direct mail that their cap will be removed from the 7th of November, because carers are the new group that have been taken out of the benefit cap, so they will be removed. From the 7th of November, the revised benefit cap implementation begins. Now, there's an automatic re-rating of the currently capped claimants to the new rate, but that is going to be staggered. So as yet, we don't know which areas will be affected first, but it's between the 7th of November and the 28th of January 2017 that the benefit cap will come into effect for people. Okay, but I can't tell you yet what order that's going in.
Just on that point, we had a letter yesterday, Sue.
Okay, here we are.
So customers in Monmouthshire, the households that we're talking about, the 90, will be affected from 14th of November.
Right, okay.
The average impact is £70 a week for these households, so it's quite a reduction. And the way it works is that the housing benefit is reduced, so or the housing cost element of the universal credit. So the responsibility falls on the local authority to inform these customers that their benefits are going to reduce, and to advise them that it's coming off their housing benefit, their rent rebate. So then it's a matter of looking at what mitigations we can put in place for those families, which I'll come to later on.
Okay, so as I said, we're working internally, obviously, to help people affected. We're also working with the local authorities to ensure that employment, housing and budgeting support for those affected is available. And so people who don't have conditionality requirements, as in people who just want just have voluntary appointments, we've got a range of childcare support available through them locally, through Flexible Support Fund, Universal Support Scheme. You know, we help them become digitally and financially independent. We offer free budgeting advice via our partnership with the Money Advice Service. Obviously, the local authorities, there's a discretionary housing payments, which Richard will go on to. In some areas, joint local authority and DWP interviews are being undertaken, but if not, you know, they're being done independently. Some good practice things are, you know, in one area in the country, DWP are helping to train 100 local authority staff where Universal Full Credit is operating to help answer questions about inquiries for housing costs. You know, local authority staff are invited into the job centre and vice versa to promote closer working so that we know how universal credit and benefit cap is affecting each other. And basically, you know, we will continue to share good practices that we find out through other areas in the country, and also to work together with the local authority to ensure that benefit cap, you know, it is going to come in, to ensure that, you know, it comes in and we're helping those people who are most affected by it. We probably, do you want to go on to your piece now about the DHP, or do you want? Has anybody got any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Sue.
Cap?
It's very complicated. I think we appreciate that our ability to ask questions is from a local authority perspective, particularly in Monmouthshire. There are those who I would dearly like to have in the chamber to be called to account for some of the things that you've told us about, but they don't include you, and that's for another place. But are there questions that people would like to ask at this stage? Because you've given us some very helpful but quite complex information, I think. Councillor Jordan and then Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You gave a figure, 41% go into work if not capped. Could you just expand on that? I didn't quite understand that figure.
Yeah, I mean, what they've done is they've looked at households and the evaluation of the initial benefit cap, which was the one in 2013, that's right, showed that the capped households were 41% more likely to enter work than similar uncapped households. So I think the extra support and the fact that, you know, people, the realisation that they were going to lose that money, people took advantage of it, and it did work, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. Not a question, a request, really.
Yeah.
I think that when this comes in, I'm sure local members are going to have people useful if we had details of who to pass them on to.
Right, okay, yes, that's fine, yep, we can sort that out. Thank you.
One of the things that might well be a helpful follow-up to this, Sue, if you were able to,
Yeah.
would be to perhaps let Hazel have either the notes that you've got or a version of them that can then be circulated to members. And if, but Councillor Chapman's point is a wider one, going beyond the committee. It's about how councillors as a whole can be better informed and therefore better able to help, isn't it? And that'll probably come up in other presentations as well, won't it, Richard?
Yeah. Can I just make the point, we will be visiting every single household. So we've got 2 officers we've assigned as part of our shared benefits service to this project, because the impact on these households is so significant. And not only that, in each and every household there are 3 or more children involved. In Torvine, we've got access to quite a lot more in terms of funded services that have been externally funded. What we've done hitherto is, as Sue has said, some communications have gone out. We're aware that registered social landlords have support services that they can put in place, but the real risk group here are those in private rented accommodation who don't have access to the support services that otherwise are available. And we've worked quite closely with Ian's team, with Martine, as well as with the DWP. And Martine has got a number of referrals now. We've asked these households about whether they are able to manage their finances, whether they have budgetary support, whether there are support services in place that from social care for their children, etc. What we want to do is try and safeguard their tenancies, make sure they stay in the homes that they're currently living in, and give them time, respite, so that they can plan how they can move into work. In practice, it's very difficult for them, because if you've got children, you've got childcare responsibilities. There's not always a partner involved in these households either. So it is very complex.
Councillor Wintle and then Councillor Hickman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm well, quite disturbed, actually. Your DWP offices are in Abergavenny, I understand.
Yes.
Well, how are the people in Monmouth going to access services? They're going to get a reduction of, on average, £70. There's a irregular bus service from Monmouth to Abergavenny. They've lost this money. They're probably on low money anyway. So I can see problems with this, you know, these people being isolated in Monmouth area.
As in, do you mean to go in for appointments and things like this?
Yes.
I mean, there is help available for people if they need it. You know, we can cover travel costs for certain things for them. But I mean, Abergavenny do service Monmouth town, you know, as you know, and people travel from Monmouth. At the last count, there were, I think, 40-something people going into Abergavenny Job Centre from Monmouth. And I think one by choice goes to Chepstow Job Centre, but you know that is through choice. You know, they will be offered the same support. You know, the voluntary appointments for people who don't make regular trips into the job centre, they will be offered the support. You know, I can assure you that everybody will receive the same support.
Right.
Yeah.
Happy with that?
Well, it's an answer.
We have discussed this on previous occasions,
Yeah,
not necessarily in this committee,
Yes.
and it was suggested at one point that DWP might consider working with our passenger transport unit to provide a bus service for people to help them to meet their needs. I'm thinking particularly of your constituents getting to Abergavenny. Just a thought. It might actually be cheaper than subsidising individual fares. Councillor Hickman.
Thank you, Chair. couple of quick questions. The first one is, you're saying the second letters are going out.
Yes.
The first letters, did you get much response from?
We didn't actually. No.
Didn't get hardly anything.
And that was the same when the benefit cap happened the first time. Yeah, we had very few people contacting us. So we have been, then our follow-up action is, as I say, to make the 3 attempts. We've had Job Centre Plus staff doing that. We've also had in Monmouthshire the PACE staff doing that, and also Communities for Work as well.
Thank you.
The PACE are the Communities for Work people that work with parents with children. So obviously from their point of view they've had quite a big involvement with this.
Okay, I mean that would probably say the first response is ignored, the second probably will be, it won't be till it actually happens and they're in dire straits that then they come knocking, I guess. But that's the next question, the follow-on really is, it's nice to try and keep them in the private tenancies, but if we don't, then it falls on us to rehouse them anyway, doesn't it? So it's a massive problem for us as an authority, I would have thought.
Yeah, if I can just, yes, I think you're absolutely right, because the tendency is to ignore communications, isn't it, until they're going to affect you. And that's quite, I think that's what's happening typically with these communications. As I've said, we are, as a local authority service, we are contacting every household to go to see these families and to forewarn them about the change that's coming up. I've actually written a report for Torvine. I don't know what the equivalent costs are in Monmouthshire, but we estimate that a homeless family costs about £8,000 per annum to house. A looked after child costs about £125,000 a year. Yeah. So the consequences of someone being homeless as a result of these changes, the financial consequences for the authority are significant.
Could we have a moratorium on red lights? If you could, all except me for the moment, switch your mics off, and then the system will come back into that's right. Thank you. Any further questions at this stage that people wish to ask? Obviously, there'll be opportunities later as we've got the kind of agenda that we have. But any more questions, particularly for Sue at this stage? Well, Sue, thank you very much for taking us into that, and I'm sure we appreciate the issues that you've brought to us. Now then, you hinted, Richard and Michelle, that this is going to be a double act. Which of you is going to go first? Richard? Okay, thank you very much.
Put together a brief presentation for you. Don't propose to duplicate some of the things that Sue has commented on already. This is more focused on Monmouthshire as a local authority and the impact of the changes that we've had to date and those that are coming up on Monmouthshire residents, and what we are doing to assist and support customers through the changes, through the welfare reforms. I'm going to break off because we thought it would be a good idea for you to have some actual case studies to look at families, the complex circumstances, and how what we've put in place supports those families. So Michelle has some examples that she's going to take you through. So these are the major reforms impacting on Monmouthshire customers. The under-occupation charge, spare room subsidy, bedroom tax, call it what you will, which is restricting rents for working age people, currently affects 492 households with an average impact of £13 a week. So that's number one. Number two, private sector rent limits, which have restricted rents, particularly for those who are under 35. Their rents are limited to a shared room rate, it's called. Even if they live in 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom accommodation, they only get housing benefit up to a level of £54.60 a week. So there are 75 single households who are affected by an average of £35 a week by those changes. And then we have the household benefit cap. This is the current situation. There are 25 households currently affected. As we've just heard, those figures will increase with the changes in the benefit cap to around about 90 households. What do we see as our responsibility? Well, we see as our responsibility to, and certainly from my part and my service, to assist customers to meet the impact of the changes, to try to maintain some form of financial stability for them and to maintain their homes, to signpost them to access support services to assist them to find more suitable housing. Certainly we've worked very closely with Ian and his team in that respect, to obtain budgetary support. And we know that the RSLs and Ian's team have budgetary advice, and to find work. We routinely provide customers with information about work clubs and about job search as part of the literature that we send out. But I think it's important to bear in mind that some customers impacted by the bedroom tax in particular are not able to change their situation. If you bear in mind that there are quite a number of people in Monmouthshire who are disabled and live in specially adapted accommodation, so we can't expect them to find smaller properties or downsize because their existing properties have been converted for their own purposes. What are the suggested mitigations for people affected by the bedroom tax? I think we've been through some of these things before, but this is what the DWP say in their advice circular to local authorities, that we should advise customers: downsize to smaller properties, get a lodger, or increase your income, stroke, find work. So they're the panaceas or the criteria we should follow in terms of advising people to avoid the bedroom tax. And in some circumstances, people are able to do that, but we know the limitations, for example, on the availability of one-bedroom or smaller properties in Monmouthshire and the practicalities of asking people to downsize. As Sue has said, the government has provided increased funding to local authorities as part of what's called the discretionary housing payment scheme. So this means we can top up housing benefit for those people who are affected by the bedroom tax, or by the benefit cap actually as well, if there's a shortfall and the customer is having difficulty in paying their rent. Monmouthshire has a good record of using the discretionary housing payment fund to safeguard tenancies and to prevent homelessness. In fact, there was a table produced of local authorities in Wales, and we're right up there in terms of our expenditure on discretionary housing payments. In addition to funding from the department, the council has decided in previous years that an extra £60,000 should be allocated per annum to ensure we direct help to where it is needed. And in fact, the government has criticised local authorities for not spending even the funding that they're allocated, and there are instances in poorer parts of Wales, for example, where local authorities are not spending their full discretionary housing payment allocation. And as a result of that, they have to give money back to DWP. Right, just looking at expenditure on discretionary housing payments, because after all, as a local authority, although we can signpost people, we can support them, we can advise them that they should find work. If they're still not able to afford their rent, then all we've got is this discretionary housing payment fund. So this just sets out how much we spent in 2015-16. We had funding from the DWP of, I believe, 117,000 or thereabouts, and we spent 168,000. This just sets out the awards that were made. 1,129 awards were made, but 778 of those were due to the bedroom tax. 17 were due to the benefit cap, 84 due to the private rent changes, and a further 250 just due to general hardship, people having difficulty in affording their rent. And then the purpose of the payments is set out there. We assisted people who were trying to secure a move, those that were seeking imminent work, who had work starting imminently, those who are in specially adapted accommodation, and just generally with ongoing rental costs. Discretionary housing payment awards are normally based on an assessment of a customer's income and expenditure. So a customer will fill in an application form and then they'll set out what their income is and what they spend each week. And we'll look at things like expenditure on mobile phones, satellite television, as well as expenditure on childcare, food, and all the rudiments and the necessary items of life. Customers are warned that help is short-term and they should take action to address their circumstances. So we always suggest those mitigations that were mentioned in the earlier slide. And in many cases, awards are for part of a rent shortfall, not the whole amount. Generally, we would be paying for half or 3/4, not the full amount, because we have to stretch the fund across so many needy or deserving cases. Generally, it's for a 6-month period, but many customers apply at the end of the 6-month period because they still have difficulty in paying their rent. What I would say is the policy, and we've got, as Hazel has said, we've got a new policy that we're bringing forward to incorporate aspects of the benefit cap. It is robust, and very few customers have challenged our decision making. And we have had very few appeals against discretionary housing payments. We have had, or are dealing with, and I've got one tomorrow, an appeal hearing in Newport from customers who object to the bedroom tax and its fairness or otherwise. So we've got a full appeal tribunal tomorrow to consider that. So at this point, I'll hand over to Michelle. That's quite a dense slide, but it'd be easier if she took you through the details of the case studies that she's got here that illustrate how we've used discretionary housing payments and the complexity of the family circumstances we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Before going into the case study, I'd just like to set some context about how welfare reform is impacting on Monmouthshire housing tenants. When the bedroom tax was introduced in 2013, we had just under 400 tenants affected. That number is now down to 284 cases. And the reason that it's reduced is that some tenants have chosen to downsize to a smaller property. Some are because of the ages of the children. Those children are now entitled to their own bedroom, so they're no longer affected by the bedroom tax, and some tenants have moved into employment. We currently have 284 tenants affected by the bedroom tax, and their arrears are running at around 51,000. Of those 284, probably 3/4 of them need a 1-bedroom property if they're prepared to downsize. And you've already heard about the shortage of 1-bedroom properties in the county. So downsizing isn't an option for many of those tenants, even if there are 1-bedroom flats available. Of those 284 bedroom tax cases, we've currently got 133 tenants receiving a discretionary housing payment from the local authority, and that is helping them to meet the shortfall in their housing benefits. The average shortfall that they're receiving is £9.66 a week. What I would like to point out is that the discretionary housing payment does not pay the full 100% of somebody's bedroom tax. The tenant is still required to top up that shortfall from their benefits. And quite alarmingly, we've got 64 discretionary housing payments expiring this month. So we will be working with our tenants to assist them to make new applications and to make the case really that they are still in financial hardship, that they are looking at options where they're appropriate. Moving on to the benefit cap, quite alarmingly, we've heard that there are 90 tenants going to be affected by the lower cap when it's introduced now in November. We've currently only got 5 tenants affected by the cap, but in November that will increase to a further 23. So, as Richard said, predominantly they are families with 3 or more children. Now, the options for those families are really quite limited. The potential impact on those households is, of those 23 new households, is they will be losing over £2,000 a week in benefits, which adds up to £109,000 a year. So that's a stark figure for just those 23 Monmouthshire housing families. And universal credit hasn't really hit us yet in Monmouthshire because it's only being rolled out to single JSA claimants, and we've only got 17 claimants receiving universal credit. All of them are in arrears with their rent. Okay, moving on to the first case study then. This was a tenant in the north of the county who was in an awful situation, really. She had a violent ex-partner so she was suffering from domestic abuse. There were also problems with condition of the property. Due to the risk posed to her 2 children, they were actually taken into care by the local authority. This then meant that this tenant was under-occupying her Monmouthshire housing property by 2 bedrooms and affected by the benefit tax, and her housing benefit was reduced by 25%. So that meant she lost about £23 a week of housing benefit. At the same time then, when she was going through all of this, it resulted in an overpayment in her council tax benefit and her tax credits. So her benefits were being further reduced while that overpayment money was being clawed back. At this stage, her arrears had escalated to £1,300. And she approached us for assistance. We supported her to make a discretionary housing payment to Richard's team, and due to the severe hardship that she was in and her lack of income, we also worked with the food bank to get her some food. She was also had other debts, so she worked with our specialist debts advisor to try and address those other debts as well. We were successful in getting a backdated discretionary housing payment for her, which was paid to her in a lump sum, which meant that her arrears were brought back under control. This actually enabled her to get some reassurance in her life that she had accommodation, and then to start to consider her future. She was keen to try and return to work, and was interested in working in the catering industry. So she worked with our Working Skills Wise team, and we were able to help her into a part-time job with a catering company. And she also received a bursary from Monmouthshire Housing to help pay for her food hygiene certificate. The backdate in housing benefit, being able to secure employment and also managing her debts, brought her arrears back under control and reduced them by over £1,000. She's since made an application to Monmouthshire Home Search to transfer and downsize to a smaller property, and is actively bidding on 1-bedroom properties. I'm under no illusions that the discretionary housing payment that we received played a crucial part really in helping that tenant in a moment of crisis and who was in severe hardship. It allowed a decrease in the stress that she was under for her to help plan effectively for the future. Okay, the second...
Can I just stop you there for a minute? And this is not a comment I'm going to address to you personally. There are real difficulties in following this on the screen. People can't see what's on the screen, I guess. So as a general reminder to those who organise our affairs, we really do have to specify minimum font sizes for reading. There should be minimum font sizes anyway for people with visual difficulties. But in the chamber, we really do need to look very carefully at the advice that we give to our witnesses on what font size to use in reports. I'm sorry to have to do that to you now, but it's just been triggered. So if you could, as you take us through them, which is absolutely fine that you should do this, just bear in mind that people actually probably can't. I can't read below the subheading with ease. Others may be in the same position, I don't know. Councillor Jones, from where you're sitting, you've probably got a bigger screen to look at.
No, I can't see it at all, Chair. Can I just ask a quick question, please, about that case study? The 2 children that became LAC children, were they returned? Did she ask for them?
My understanding is the children will not be returned to her, hence her decision to move to a 1-bedroom property.
Okay, thank you.
Right, but that's a particular case. It's not a.
No.
Thank you.
So,
Councillor Harris.
In that case, Chair, then that's a massive burden on the county council. It's just madness. It really is.
This is the point that officers made earlier. This is the point that members have made. And yeah, it's a catch-22, isn't it? I appreciate you do what you can, but in some instances, we don't know what the other case studies will reveal. In this particular case, the burden is shifted. Sorry, Councillor Jordan, I beg your pardon, I didn't see that you wished to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just I thought something instantly. What would happen in a situation where the children were only taken into temporary care and there was a prospect that the children would return to the former home? I mean, there'd still be an overpayment, would there?
There would still be an overpayment because she was under occupying while those children weren't living with her, but obviously she would be able to stay in that property, and we would work with the tenant and social services to get the children returned if that was appropriate. In this particular circumstance, I don't believe it is.
I'm sorry, we've rather interrupted your flow, at least I have. Do please continue.
Okay, the second case study is again a tenant in the north of the county who was referred to our Moneywise service, and that was because her employment support allowance had been stopped. At this point, she was already in significant arrears of over £1,500 and had other debts. She had a patchy record with Monmouthshire Housing and wasn't a tenant that would engage with us normally. The stopping of her employment support allowance actually and then her housing benefit was stopped as well. That actually pushed her into a crisis, and she approached us for help. This tenant was actually working part-time. She was working 12 hours a week, which was allowable under the ESA criteria. But when her ESA stopped and her housing benefits stopped, this meant that she was trying to live on her wages, which was about £300 a month, which she had to pay all her bills and debts, and her rent, which was £70 a week. Again, we assisted her to make an application for a discretionary housing payment, and which was successful. We also supported her to appeal against her ESA being stopped. And her housing benefit was reinstated. Without receiving that discretionary housing payment during the time that she was going through the ESA appeal, which can take several weeks to determine, her state of anxiety and depression would have been quite horrific, really. And she was even at one point contemplating giving up her part-time job because she just couldn't cope with everything that was going on. She continued to work, however, and her appeal against her ESA being stopped was successful, and her debts returned to a manageable level. Since receiving the DHP and the assistance that we were able to give her, her relationship with Monmouthshire Housing has changed. She is engaging with us now, and she is actively seeking support from us, and her rent account is now in credit.
Okay, so those case studies illustrate how the discretionary housing payment policy has been put into practice, I hope. Part of, well, certainly me and Michelle coming along here today was to seek your reaffirmation of that approach to how we administer discretionary housing payments and mitigate some of the wider impacts upon the authority, although in that first case we were only able to do it in part because the children still went into care. But we are facing a more significant challenge as well as a result of some further changes that the government are bringing in. Sue summarised them earlier, so I don't propose to go into the detail about the benefit cap. But as Michelle has indicated, there's going to be a further impact upon landlords potentially of the benefit cap. I think, what was the figure? 23 cases. Yeah. And the overall impact potentially per year was over £100,000. 109. In terms of rental impact, if you like. Now, we'll only be able to mitigate that in part from the discretionary housing payment budget because we've got so much demand upon it. But certainly we've got an added pressure on the budget. This is just a summary of the new benefit cap and its impact upon Monmouthshire. We've mentioned about the average impact, £70 a week, the families generally have 3 or more children. Some of the families are already accessing support from Monmouthshire County Council services in housing and social care, but we are referring new untapped demand, particularly to colleagues in Ian's team and to Martine. The new demand will significantly increase pressure on the DHB budget, and the change will mean that the funding that we currently allocate will be under severe pressure, because we'll have a new demand being created, and we may need to reduce the awards of some of the people that we're helping at the moment as a result of that. But I would reiterate that expenditure via the DHB budget means we stave off the impact on families in terms of homelessness and displacement, and that the impact on services and cost to the council is also reduced significantly, because even one looked after child would soak up all of MHA's rent arrears for the next year as a result of benefit cap. So just quickly on the DHB policy, we've updated it, but it's basically the same criteria, the same tone. It sets out how we will assist customers, and it reflects latest guidance on good practice from the department. It sets out the council's approach to providing help and the decision-making process for making awards that I summarised earlier. It is at the crux, really, of a lot of these changes, because the government is saying, well, we are providing funding to local authorities to mitigate the impact of our welfare reforms via the discretionary housing payment budget. And even those on universal credit who have rent shortfalls, it's our responsibility to assist them via the discretionary housing payment scheme. So there's a much wider impact than just benefits and just benefit administration and just the internal workings of the local authority, as we've heard. The policy is designed to be fair, resilient and robust, and I believe it is. I just want to get the message across to your good selves that it will be increasingly under pressure as we move forward.
Thank you, Richard. Can we be clear at this point as a committee what we're actually being asked to do? Because it's not completely clear from the papers. We're actually not only receiving this policy with its revisions as a piece of information, we're also actually being asked as a committee, are we not, to endorse it? And presumably at some point there is a cabinet decision that this is the way we wish to go for the next year at least, yes? So I don't know where we are in the timetable for that process. Can anybody help me with this? Is it about to go to cabinet? Are we therefore doing a pre-decision scrutiny? Ruth?
Yeah, it is pre-scrutiny. It's scheduled to go to cabinet now on, I think it's the 7th of November.
So when we continue our discussion in a moment, if you wish, would we bear that in mind, members, that we will need to reach a conclusion on this particular matter? For many of the other things, it's kind of observations and suggestions, but on this one, we do actually need to say, do we endorse this or something else? We might want to say, go back and think again, or we might want to say, no longer interested. I doubt it very much, but we need to make a definite recommendation to cabinet. Am I right, Hazel?
Yes.
Thank you. So, Richard, and thank you for taking us through those things. Again, these are complex issues, difficult to handle in this format. I must say, for my own part, members will have their own views. It is very helpful to have case studies. You do get a little bit closer to the realities, and a little bit closer, I guess, to the level of which some of us as councillors will be engaging with the very people that we're talking about. So I'm going to open this to questions from members. Councillor Penny-Jones.
Sorry, it's just a point of interest. When the discretionary housing payment is coming to an end, 3 years was it or something? How long was it awarded for? Oh, 6. Yes, sorry, 6 months. When it's coming to an end, and is there a can they reapply for an extension before that time is up, or is there a gap before they can apply?
They can apply before the time is up.
So it could be continuous.
Yeah. Many of these payments are running concurrently
Up to 3 years.
and have done since 2013.
Right, that's what I meant. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With the two case studies, there's a common factor between the two, and there's that significant rent arrears. Rent arrears obviously are flagged up by you. How long does it take within the system for you to begin to realise that there's a problem with the tenant?
We would be aware if somebody's missed a rent payment immediately. It's about, we would then start going through our arrears recovery procedures, which is very much on trying to catch arrears early. And that would be by writing to the tenant, ringing the tenant, visiting the tenant. Texting is very effective with our tenants to try and get them to engage, to find out why the rent isn't being paid. Sometimes what we find is that tenants do not engage with us. They won't talk to us about their rent. And it very often has to get to crisis point, really, before they'll actually start talking to us. And that could be where the arrears at a level where we would serve what's called a notice of seeking possession, which is really the start of the legal proceedings to recover the debt. And at that point, then they start to sort of converse with us really about the issues that they're facing.
In fact, there's a common factor between what you're saying now and between what your colleague was saying earlier. It's head in the sand response, isn't it? These 3 letters that have been sent out, very little response in the first instance. Presumably, when you write about rent arrears, it's very little response. Often people don't bother reading letters, or they just ignore them.
I think, what we're trying to do, and with Universal Credit especially, is trying to sort of re-educate people to take responsibility for their own actions and for their lives. And that's very much what it is, really. And people are still, unfortunately, burying their heads in the sand until it gets to crisis point. Yeah.
Last question, just from a general point of view, the rent payments that you receive, are the benefits paid to the tenant and then the tenant pays you the rent, or does the rent come directly to you from the government?
In the vast majority of the cases, the housing benefit and the discretionary housing payment is paid directly to us. It's only those 17 tenants that are on Universal Credit where the money is paid to them. And we do have about 120 tenants that receive their housing benefit directly, which was part of a direct payment pilot that we did last year with Richard's team, testing out really what would happen under Universal Credit. It worked okay. Some paid and some didn't. So what we had was as soon as the arrears hit 8 weeks, we switched them back off direct payments. And then we're working with them now to try and recover that debt. Those tenants that are managing their rent accounts have been left on direct payments.
Thank you. Are there any more questions before I ask a few? When you get home tonight, there was a wonderful programme on Radio 4 this morning at 9 o'clock about daydreaming, or all the things that we really would rather call it differently according to some of the knowledgeable people in the field. And I must have been daydreaming. Richard, did I hear you say at one point earlier in your presentation, did you mention satellite TV? In what context was that?
It's when we look at income and expenditure. So, the customer declares their expenditure to us. So typically there'll be a Sky TV broadband package that will be part of that consideration, yeah?
Far be it from me to say people shouldn't have satellite TV, but we shouldn't be subsidising Mr. Murdoch, in my view.
Or Mr. Branson.
Two more areas of questioning, if I could. Don't think Mr. Branson provides satellite television, which was the specific example. He does other things of note. Michelle, I wonder if you could help me. And again, I'm trying to get behind the principles, and I think what you've described to us as the work that MHA does, let me say from the outset, frankly, is admirable. But it does raise the question, why on earth you should be doing it? Why should MHA be so orientated towards its tenants that is prepared to provide them with all this help and support? Can you give us a bit of a rationale?
As a social landlord, it's very much, we are more than a landlord. We provide lots of advice and support to our tenants, and we very much see that as a role. I think housing associations over the last few years have had to diversify into different services and plug the gaps that have very much been left by cuts in the public sector. We do have citizens' advice bureaus in Monmouthshire, but the services that they can provide are limited and very stretched. So we provide money advice services to our own tenants free of charge. We also provide employment and training advice and support to tenants, and we very much see that as being part of our core role, really, in about sustaining tenancies and communities going forward. Richard's already alluded to the fact that Monmouthshire does not have the same level of support services that are available in Newport and in Torvine, and transport is a massive issue for our tenants. You know, it's not easy for them to get to different towns for different appointments. So we will very much provide services in their own home.
Can I pursue that? Again, I'm just making observations, really. It does seem to me, particularly with the additional pressures coming down the track, that there might be a case for doing things differently. At the very least, I know that you all work together, and I know that you work with people not in the room. But I'm minded to ask whether we couldn't have, sort of a task force or something, brings you all together and the CABs, and asks two things, really. What's the best way of helping people facing these difficulties in the financial and legislative context in which we are? That's the first question. And the second question is, can we do it better and cheaper? Because that's also a consideration for the council. And it might be, for example, I'm just throwing this out as a suggestion, that it might work out cheaper for some of us to invest in other people's services rather than run our own. That may or may not apply to any of you around the table, but do you see what I mean? Now, I know that occasionally, or in fact more than occasionally, you come together at the sort of policy and collaboration level. But I wonder if I could sort of throw out that idea. See, this council does invest in citizens' advice. We know that there are limitations to how much support they can provide and how much support we can provide them. They are also, by the way, supported by town and community councils, another source of financial support for advice and support services, which is in many parts of the county untapped. So I just wonder whether we couldn't be thinking differently. Some of us were talking about this in the pre-meeting. We almost need a kind of single portal, don't we? I don't know. I'd like to see it investigated. But that's just me saying how I see it. Others may have quite different views. And I don't mind if officers tell us, well, we've tried this and this is actually the best way of doing it that we've got. I don't mind. I just think we need to be constantly open to the possibility of doing things differently and better where the need arises. Councillor Wintle, are you going to support me?
Yes, funnily enough, I will on this one. But in listening to well, everything that's been said this morning so far. There's several other things that are coming out, like a lot of the people are under pressure because of the bedroom tax, and they're losing money because there's no way that they can move their accommodation because there just isn't any. And then Monmouthshire seems to be under a lot of stress. We cannot seem to get our quota of low-cost housing because the developers are out there like vultures, and they don't make maximum profits and minimum social benefits. So we've also got a problem with industry and jobs for these people, because Monmouthshire is quite a large rural area, and there seems to be the idea that it's a wealthy area. Well, there are a lot of people. There are some people in there with a lot of money. I agree, but the majority of people, our customers basically, they're on minimum wage if they can get that. So we need industry. We need low-cost housing. So my sort of question really is, it's on back to the councils again, I think, to try and produce more industry and more low-cost housing. I know that the Assembly gave us the guidance at the last RDP of 35% for low-cost housing on developments. So I cannot understand why we are being reduced to 30% or 25%, or some developments, nothing. Because, I know that the planning department is fearful of the inspector coming along and saying, we should grant what the developer wants. But if they already set the guidelines, why are we fearful of them going against it? Because obviously they're in the wrong, not us. So that's my query.
Chief Planning Officer didn't come this morning to answer questions, but I believe he would like to say something on this. Would you not, Mark?
Yeah, Chair, just very briefly, I don't want to clog up your select meeting with planning things. But it's the policy in the LDP is a target of 35% in most of the county, not all of it. But it's very clear in national policy and our policy, we have to look at development viability. So it's not about maximising developers' profits, but there's an accepted toolkit and approach that we have to allow for developers to have a profit. They're not in it for a charity. If they don't make any profits or a reasonable profit, they just won't build, and we'll get 35% of nothing. So we have to strike that balance. But no, I accept we're not getting the higher percentages we wanted on some of the key sites, and we go through in detail in planning committee why that is, when it is. So I won't drag out the debate further now, Chair, but it is certainly something we're aware of and working to. But it's a little bit more complicated than it's perhaps alluded to.
Thank you, Mark. I'm grateful to that. Just for background, because you may not have been here when all this started. May not have been with the authority, the chair of the planning committee is also a member of this committee. We have often brought ourselves to the point in discussions of this sort that it would actually be jolly useful if there could be some sort of joint meeting. I don't know whether it's a seminar, a workshop, I don't know what, some sort of joint coming together, certainly of this committee and planning, with yourself and your team and with our colleagues at the front here, to see whether we could just at the very least reassure ourselves that we've got all the I's dotted and T's crossed in this area. Because short of committing ourselves to our own major building programme, working with colleagues in social housing, I don't see what else we can do except to look at upcoming developments. But I'm not going to clog the meeting up either. I just wanted to make that point. Hazel has a point to make, and then I think, for the sake of completeness, sorry, Councillor Jordan again in a moment, then I think we should ask Ian to come in on this so that we've got all the things out on the table before we draw any conclusions.
Just wanted to let members know that the Economy and Development Select Committee will be meeting at the end of September, and they will be inviting the Planning Committee to that meeting, where Mark will bring his annual performance report, and that will look at the performance of the function over the year before it's submitted to Welsh Government, and they'll be looking at another report, Mark, isn't it, the annual performance review?
Yeah, it's the annual monitoring report on the local development plan, and that one's got several bits of wider interest. I would just mention that the topic will come up at that meeting, no doubt, but I think there's a lot to talk about on affordable housing, so I'm happy to talk with you further about how we arrange this joint meeting you've suggested.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor,
Thank you, Chair. A very small point. I don't really agree with the position that Mark takes on affordable housing. The ability for the developer to make profit depends on the base purchase price that the developer pays to the landowner. If the authority insists that you have 35% low-cost housing, affordable housing on the development, the developers in their negotiations with the landowner will have to take that into account on the cost that, or the price that they pay the landowner. Okay? Simple as that. Thank you.
I'm going to suggest we don't actually pursue that now, because before we know where we are, we'll be straying into, I don't know, the Defence of the Realm Act and anything else but I take your point. The point was well made. I'm sure Mark will note that as in his thinking with others about a possible joint meeting, and thank you for that. Councillor Harris, did you want to add anything?
Well, it was only to say that reinforces what Mark is saying, why we can't necessarily get the 35% that we want. It's as simple as that. You know, if the viability doesn't stack up, then developers aren't going to develop, and we'll end up with nothing.
Ian, I'm going to invite you to, I was going to say, get us out of this hole. Take us into some related but slightly different territory.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Yeah, as you've seen, we've done a report on the Council's Financial Inclusion Service, and in one context, the service is very specialist and specific, but equally it really does overlap significantly with all the other discussions that have gone ahead. And as we go through it, I think you'll see how significant that overlap is and the relevance of that overlap. So really this is the first presentation that we've done on the Council's Financial Inclusion Service. This is a relatively new service and a relatively new post, and it's a very specialist post. And as I said earlier, the focus of the financial inclusion post and Martine is very much homeless prevention and sustaining tenancies. And it really, from our perspective, it really was prompted by the Housing Act 14, which made homeless prevention a statutory duty for the council. And that followed very quickly by the Welsh Government Code of Guidance. It is only guidance, but there's a lot of weight put towards that piece of guidance. So we tend to follow it pretty much like the law. And to guide us on our way in terms of developing our homeless prevention services, as you know, I've said many a time, we're always looking to strengthen our homeless prevention services in the council. And we were independently reviewed, and again it was pointed out to us that we didn't have a financial inclusion service that supported homeless prevention. And probably all around us, there is good practice that we can point to. Again, our housing association colleagues have had well-established financial inclusion teams, and that's obviously focused very much on tenants. It is homeless prevention, but it obviously has a wider benefits. But similarly, we didn't have that provision within the council. So 2015, we appointed Martine. Nothing complicated about the service. Basically, anyone that approaches the housing options team and there is a underlying financial issue, they will be automatically passported to Martine, who will give them those applicants one-to-one support. I won't go into all the things that Martine can do, but she'll look at absolutely any aspect of their financial circumstances after an assessment, with a view to minimising their expenditure, maximising their income, and obviously trying to address any homeless risks. And I think the important thing in terms of Martine's role, as I say, is the advantages that she's bringing to the table. She's highly mobile. She'll do home visits, and as Councillor Jordan's alluded, it really is common for people to not engage when there is a problem, and obviously the ability to visit people at home is a really helpful asset. Martine will prioritise applicants depending on the urgency of their cases, and I've said in the report it's not uncommon for the team to get referrals either from another agency or from an applicant themselves to say, I'm going to be evicted in a few days, or I'm going to court in a few days. And of course that just makes it so much more difficult for us to support households. But Martine's ability to juggle, and she will juggle, is really important. And another thing that's I suppose quite unique in terms of Martine's role is that she will actually get involved directly with private landlords. So I'll have a private landlord who's served a notice for whatever reason, and Martine will try and negotiate with those landlords to try and either stay of execution or completely change the mind. She provides aftercare, so even after the service that immediate crisis has been resolved, Martine's there and available to keep an eye on people, hopefully to stop people slipping back. And by virtue of being within the housing options team, we have a prevention fund budget which we will use for rent in advance, deposits. We can use creatively and flexibly, and Martine has got access to that, and indeed does make full use of that. She attends court, so we'll get into negotiations with magistrates to help in the context of homeless prevention. And obviously being based within the authority, she's got the real advantages of being able to work closely, particularly with Richard's team. And I think increasingly getting very much involved with council tax, aren't you? So again, that's helping to bring in additional revenue from a council tax perspective. So that's Martine's core role, very much homeless prevention, but she does have other roles. And again, as Richard's alluded, Richard's team and the DWP will refer cases through to Martine with regards around personal budgeting. She also supports individuals around accessing the private rented sector. It's not uncommon for people to find a property. So many times the rent is, too high or seems high, but Martine will support individuals with affordability assessments. There's probably not really a lot more I can add to that. Really, I think that gives you a flavour of the role. In the report we've drafted, we've highlighted the performance, and I think again, to give it some more context, in terms of our Section 66 applications that we successfully prevented last year, we were fifth highest in Wales, and Martine was obviously an important part of that performance. We restructured to create Martine's role, so she very much has added capacity to the team, but obviously not just in terms of person, but obviously in terms of specialism. So, and there's a case study at the back, and again, I think I won't go into that case study, but again, if that case had failed, there would have been significant costs to the authority in a whole host of ways, and I would suggest far more than £8,000, the average that Richard in this particular case. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Questions from Councillors Jordan and Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. Within this chamber, we have three sources of advice from people to people who've got financial problems. We've got Housing Options, we've got MHA, and CAB, in fact. In our meeting on the 12th of July, we had a discussion concerning the Financial Inclusion Officer. And we had a presentation also from the CAB, which was very comprehensive and appeared to deal with a very much wider aspect of debt. Obviously, many people who have problems with housing also have other problems, and it seemed to us on that occasion that the CAB officer was able to capture many problems rather than just one specific issue. At that meeting on the 12th of July, we suggested perhaps, or the chair suggested, that perhaps each of these organisations collaborate and see if they could have a joint or uniform approach to the issue of debt, because Monmouthshire County Council funds Housing Options, also funds largely CAB, and we've got a duplication of expense. The question is, what collaboration, if any, has there been or is proposed to see if all these services can be combined into one, rather than have individuals being moved, perhaps because of specialisms, from pillar to post to deal with specific aspects of their lives.
Would anybody like to rise to Councillor Jordan's challenge?
Yeah, I mean, in response, I mean, what I will say is that probably the extent that you've made reference to, there hasn't been any attempt to, if you like, come up with the one service that I suppose Councillor Farley is alluded to, but we all, as agencies, do sit round the table on a regular basis, and there is collaboration. Now, obviously, I won't. There will be opportunities for more collaboration, and I think it would probably be healthy for us to certainly do that. But on a day-to-day basis, there is a regular overlap between all of us. For example, Martin supports MHA on occasions. You work with Citizens Advice on occasions, but I guess probably where we've got to is on the basis of our specialist and specific remits. And say MHA, the business need of obviously supporting their tenants, ourselves in terms of homeless prevention, and I guess really in terms of Citizens Advice, they've provided the more generic, general advice across the county. But obviously, as Michelle's alluded, what we do know is that that does have its limitations.
Thank you, Ian. Do we know whether any of the other social landlords do similar things to you, to MHA, Michelle?
Yeah, can I just clarify? Monmouthshire Housing Services, we provide services to our own tenants only. We will provide services to the wider community where we get external funding to do that. So we've recently been successful again from getting some money from the DWP to do a pathway into careers project for people who are out of work in the county. And we have had some European funding, but predominantly our business is about supporting our own tenants. And the services we provide are replicated by Melin and Charter, the other two housing associations. RSLs, we all tend to provide the same sorts of services, but our business is very much about doing things in people's homes on a one-to-one basis. And I think that's a model that works for us, and that's what people want. We will, where we are having problems with a tenant where they're just failing to engage with us, and it really has got to the serious point where we're going into court to get them evicted, we will then make a referral into Martine to try and for her to come from a different angle, because I think very often tenants are under the misconception that if they get evicted by a housing association, the council has to house them. And of course that isn't the case, because they would be intentionally homeless. So we will refer cases into Martine where we're having no success.
Thank you. It's very, very, very spirited. And it may be that a single portal or a single service, as it were, is not achievable or even desirable. But I think what the committee would welcome would be some serious getting round the table with Melin and Charter and the CAB, just to see that there is as much joining up as is possible, and to see whether there is more streamlining that could be done. It might be worth considering a single portal idea, but then coming to the conclusion quite rapidly why it may or may not be possible or desirable. But I think it would be good, as a follow-up to the points that Councillor Jordan has made and to previous discussions in the committee, if we could do something of the sort together. And Ian will no doubt tell me he's got a meeting planned for tomorrow where just this will happen.
Not tomorrow, but there is a financial inclusion partnership in Monmouthshire, and as I say, all the agencies that have been mentioned are on that, and we'll broach that at the meeting. And I say, obviously, any opportunities to improve the situation for us all. We're all looking for ins and improvements, so we'll do that.
I'm conscious that Councillor Jones wanted to say something. Did you not? Sorry.
Yes, Chair. It's all right. It's on a different tack completely, and it's really just a small statement, just to say that I welcome, and I hope we welcome, the role of Martine, because it is such an important role, and it's a frontline post which helps people directly and adds such value to the team. So I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that all the committee, by looking at you, would echo that. And Martine, you have come to us today already with these achievements. The progress towards this point has been well charted through meetings of the committee. And like many of the things that that we get to talk about. Seeds will have been sown some time ago, but have been brought to the present stage. So thank you for what you do. I've got a question for you. Has anybody else got any questions? I've got one question for both Martine and Michelle. Same question. Welcome your views. The case studies and general understanding of things points to the fact that clearly you are working at times, maybe at all times, I don't want to be generalizing, you certainly work with some difficult family circumstances. What is done to mitigate the risks to you personally? You may well be lone working in some very troubled family environments where there must be surely some risk to you. What do you or your organisations, including this council, do to help you in that situation? And don't be afraid to tell us if we don't do enough.
From Monmouthshire Housing's point of view, we have a very robust loan working policy. All of our staff are provided with an electronic loan working system which GPIS tracks them, that has a panic alarm button on it that would go through to a control centre if they are in distress. We also have a very robust sort of screening process. So we have a number of tenants that are flagged up what we call a two-person visit. So we don't visit those alone because of what we know about them or previous behaviour. And I'm happy to say that there haven't been any incidents recently. What I would say with our money advice officers, they're not the enemy. They're very much going in to support tenants and help tenants. So tenants are very welcoming of them. I think the staff probably that are at most risk are those ones trying to collect the money and deal with rent arrears or deal with antisocial behaviour.
Which tracks me around Monmouthshire. And there's buttons on the back that I can press to say before I go into a visit and when I come out. I've been doing the job for a very long time for the Ministry of Defence before, so I use my gut instinct, and I'm always careful that I keep eye contact with people, that I don't answer my mobile phone because I consider that to be rude. I will work with them directly, very carefully, and I listen very carefully to them. So if I feel that they're going off and getting upset, I'll change the subject. I'll talk about the weather, or I'll talk about something else, just to let them calm down, and then we'll start again. And that's how I work. On our Outlook system, I've also got all my visits on there. I can ring into the office as well to say if I'm going to be going to visit someone that I haven't put on my list. But generally, people have been absolutely lovely. I touch wood, no problems with anybody in Monmouthshire.
Thank you. Richard, you want to?
Yeah, just as you've raised this point, Chair, I think it is something I applaud the staff protection measures that are in place, and we've got similar staff protection measures for our visiting officers. I've got 4 visiting officers who go out in Torvine and Monmouthshire. One thing I would say, and I have been hitting my head against a brick wall on this one, is there isn't a warning database available beforehand to warn officers from the council that someone is potentially violent, for example. We have a sort of corporate warning database in Torvine. So all my officers are able to access that. So if there's someone who's potentially violent or might have a firearms offence or something of that nature, then we don't go and visit them. We find other measures. Now, we can put in place our own local protections, but we don't have that, as far as I'm aware, we don't have that facility in Monmouthshire. So the obvious measures that Martine is taking are excellent, but we also need some kind of pre-warning before we go out and visit a customer, so that we don't walk into a situation that we shouldn't be in.
This doesn't apply so much to the CAB because they do some but not many home visits, as I understand. I'm just going to ask that amongst his observations and conclusions this morning, Mark might like to note that as the most senior officer here. It is a very important point. But I'm gratified personally, or reassured considerably, by the answers that we've been given, and I thought it was entirely appropriate to ask that question. I've now got one more. Oh, Delia. One more question from Delia, then I've got another one of Ian and Richard before we end this bit.
Just a very quick question for Martina, if you don't mind, Chairman. Do you have any liaison with the health service? For instance, like if you're going to, are you aware if someone is depressed or psychotic, or I've just wondered what kind of relationship you might have.
Well, I've done the first aid mental health qualification, and I've also done various qualifications when I work for the Ministry of Defence. So I know how to talk someone down from a crisis, a mental health crisis. I will refer them to GPs or to an appropriate person, perhaps over to social services if I feel that that is necessary, or if I finish my work, because my work will only be over a short period, if I feel they still need support, then I will refer on to the Gateway Support service, so that someone else is already in. So that could be someone from Mind, Plan My, so someone who specialises in mental health problems. And that's how I work. So, do you have the right to approach the GP if you're concerned? We have done in the past. We have rung the GP, especially when one lady was agoraphobic and she seemed to be going further and further downhill. We phoned the GP, but the GP was not willing to come out. So he just said she has to get better and attend the surgery, so which didn't help. So we've now put a mind person in there now, because I've sorted out all of her financial problems, because she was just not opening any of the letters and she was in a lot of trouble with courts, and losing her property was the main thing. So that's all sorted now, and a mind support officer has gone in to carry on to try and get her out into the community. That's okay.
Right, Mind is another service whose funding I think we've cut. Question for Richard and Ian. Assuming when it draws its conclusions and makes any recommendations, the committee is minded to say, go ahead with the policy that you've got in front of you, would it be helpful for the committee to recommend that Cabinet should look for some additional resource? You to put a figure on it, but Ruth, I mean, we really have to recognise that there's more stuff coming down the track that will hit us with this. And I know that the situation doesn't improve for the council's overall finances any more than it does for the individuals that we're talking about. But we've got to build a little bit of a bridge here, I think, because it's been very clear, I think, from much of the evidence this morning, that these services not only help people, and these arrangements help people directly, they also have a preventive role and a preventive potential. And, you know, given the choice between considerably increased costs for looked after children, we might want to encourage Cabinet to invest in a little bit more in this service. Is that a reasonable proposition from the point of view of officers, before I ask whether it's a reasonable proposition from the members? Yes, it would help you, would it? I'm also conscious of where some of the other money goes, and looking at some of the other figures we'll be looking at in a few minutes, my learned friends seem to do quite nicely out of some of this work, so I hope that we can find some resource to help the work that we've been discussing this morning. But that all we can do as a committee is to make a recommendation. But if we were so minded, it would clearly not come amiss with you, yeah? Okay. Any more questions, final things on this before we let people go? All right? Happy? Oh, sorry. Councillor Harris.
we've been told there's a report going to Cabinet on 7th of November. I'm not totally clear on what that report is, and as such, not being clear, not sure what recommendations we can make. Who will be making the report? Because we've had various presentations here. Is it going to be a combined report, or can somebody help me?
Yeah, the report is on the discretionary housing payment policy.
Right.
So the pre-scrutiny here is of that policy.
Okay.
Whether there could be a broader aspect to it, I don't know, but that's certainly what our intention was to. Because the discretionary housing payment policy hasn't been looked at for a couple of years. I think I came to scrutiny previously with it, and the welfare reform agenda, and the position of communities in Monmouthshire has changed in that period of time, and the way that we configure our services. But it was mainly on that aspect.
Just going back to you,
Richard. Ian?
Just going back to your earlier question, and again, I don't think it's been probably said explicitly, but I think if you think the value of the DHP is, we probably take it a little bit for granted in one respect, because as Richard says, we're aware of other authorities where they approach it a little bit differently to ourselves. And I think from a homeless prevention perspective, we've been really fortunate. You know, we have got a really good partnership in terms of the housing benefit colleagues. But you take that, if that DHP didn't exist, we would be having a very, very different conversation in this room now. And the knock-on effect of that would be significant. We haven't really had a big impact on homelessness as a result of you know, likes of the bedroom tax, but that's largely been because of the DHP policy. So it really, really is important in terms of Monmouthshire. But obviously, in terms of Councillor Farley's other point, I think it's the wider context of preventative services. We've talked about a number that we collectively provide. Obviously, they have impacts on individuals, but in terms of the costs, you know, and that's probably something that we don't really know, and probably ideally should have a better handle on. But the costs without these preventative services would be significant, and I say it would be a very, very different conversation.
I just say I'm a far be it from me to come to Monmouthshire and ask for more money. I'm a Torvine officer, and I wouldn't dream of doing that, and it's rather a difficult thing for me to say. I'm delivering a service on your behalf, and we try and work within the financial constraints that are set by Monmouthshire as an authority. But I would certainly bear out everything that Ian has said there, that your contribution that you've put forward to date has made a massive impact in terms of safeguarded tenancies and mitigating the impact of the welfare reforms, that we've got more to come, and that the impact on particular households is more striking and significant, as we've tried to illustrate. And the main mitigation we have as a local authority is, other than the brilliant support services we have available to us, is the discretionary housing payment fund. And a small increase or change in that could help us to safeguard these people who are going to be affected coming up.
Thank you, Chair. You're asking for recommendations to Cabinet, but one of the recommendations surely would be to have a risk register.
Could you say a little bit?
You're asking what recommendations this committee was going to put to Cabinet. Well, we were discussing the issue of risk to staff members. I'm suggesting that one of the recommendations should be that we set up, as they have in Torvine, a risk register.
thinking we already have a risk register, capital R, but this is specifically in the context of lone working. Absolutely right. Yeah, thank you for making that point. Richard, I think we should conclude this section 5 just by asking you, if you would, bearing in mind then that the policy document, that the policy is going to go to Cabinet on the back of our pre-decision scrutiny today, are there any significant changes to the previous policy that you need to bring to our attention?
Not as such. It just incorporates more reference to the benefit, the household benefit cap that we've talked about this morning, but that as I said, the criteria, the tone of the policy is the same. Our purpose is just coming back to council to seek reaffirmation of that approach. So it's more changes of wording than emphasis or criteria.
So we can conclude safely then that colleagues have in front of them at item 5 on the agenda and labelled as such, page 7, isn't it? Yeah. That and the pages that follow under item 5 contain, those pages contain the policy that will go to Cabinet, yes? Yep. And we don't know who's going. Are you going to present this, Mark, as Chief Officer, to Cabinet, or will it be?
It's the first I've heard of it, Chair, but one of us can cover it if we need to.
That's fine.
Or do you already have a plan in place?
I'm just trying to give some comfort to members in saying that if we do endorse this, this is what we're endorsing. It's not a different thing. We accept that it's a tweaked version of the previous policy to reflect the changes that Richard has described, but it is as you see in front of you. Yep. Happy with that?
Ruth just advised it will probably be Councillor Murphy that presents it.
That's fine. Whoever presents it, we will need to communicate to Cabinet the views of this committee on this policy, and that would be an opportunity to link, as Councillor Jordan and others have suggested, some other recommendations. Are we happy with that state of affairs? Right. In that case, then, I suggest we do the following, that we thank all of our witnesses and their supporters. You now know what's coming to you next time, probably. I didn't ask you which was the more dangerous, lone working or coming here, but I think, yes, we don't have the security things in place in quite the same way. But in all seriousness, can we thank you, all of you, for coming and meeting with us? We look forward to seeing those of you who might come again in the future. To those of you like Sue who might not come again, we wish you well. And thank you for what you've done, not only here today, but of course for all the work, as it were, behind the scenes, or at least behind this scene, that is to the benefit of our residents. And thank you, Ruth and Mark, as well. So I suggest we now take a 5-minute break so that Ty can come forward and set up for his part of the agenda. And I understand that 1 or 2 councillors will need to leave at about this time anyway, so it gives Councillor Jordan and anybody else the opportunity to make a dignified exit. So a 5-minute recess, and I look forward to seeing you after that time. Right, colleagues, shall we resume? And Councillor, he's gone. I think. I am aware that the chamber, certainly where most people are, is considerably cooler than it is here. But looking at my colleague on my left, it maybe isn't as warm as I think it is here. So I'm sorry that that's the case and that you've been sitting in the cold. And whereas you've actually been shivering, I've been looking at you and thinking you're trembling with excitement at the issues and can't wait to say something. I've taken the slightly unusual step, I hinted at the beginning that I might, to draw our conclusions in the absence of the people who've been here as our witnesses. And I'm doing that in order to give you, if you wish to take it, any opportunities to say things that might be more pertinent to one rather than the other. As things stand at the moment, and not necessarily in the order in which they would be written, the state of play with our recommendations from the previous reports under section 5 of this agenda, the state of play is this, that we have scrutinised the discretionary housing payments policy, which is a pre-cabinet decision scrutiny of an existing policy that has been updated. We have done that, and our recommendation to Cabinet is that they should implement it. In other words, we endorse the discretionary housing payments policy that has been put to us, and I think people will have no problem with that. And as I said earlier on, it's unfortunate that the paperwork didn't quite say to us what we were expected to do as opposed to anybody else, but that's a function of the timing of the meeting and the absence of one or two key people. So if you're happy with that, then I think our discussion leads us to add some further recommendations. And these are that Cabinet should consider an uplift to the amount of money that it invests in discretionary housing payments. And it should do so because it recognises the good results that have been achieved with it, the risks the risks that it will be called upon even more going forward, and that if we don't invest in a scheme such as this, we may well find ourselves with the much greater financial burden, for example, of an increased number of looked after children. So that's the sort of wording I was thinking around that. Does that make sense? Then I think, again, in no particular order, we would recommend encouragement of all the agencies who came to us today, plus the CAB, Mellin and Charter Housing. We would encourage those agencies to get together just to see whether there are any efficiencies and economies that could be made in their joint tackling of these issues.
Or sharing of best practice.
And sharing of best practice. So that, I think, is that acceptable sort of wording? I mean, in other words, it doesn't say, and we want to see a single portal, because that may not be possible, but we just want to see where that goes. Sharing good practice, that's a good one. The next one is we would like to encourage the council to set up, and we've been struggling in the break with the terminology, because it was described, a risk register, Councillor Jordan described it, but I don't think that's quite the technical word, but it's a way of identifying people who may pose a risk to lone workers in, it's a corporate, what is it? A corporate warning system.
I think you mean like a database.
Yes, database, yeah. Councillor Wintle?
The police also hold a database like that, because they do oversee what was the thing for vulnerable adults and children registers.
Yes.
So they would also have this a lot of this information, but they got some. It's very difficult to get access to that database. You could have certain protocols in place, which I suppose with the chief executive would be able to get that, which you know.
Oh, I think we could. I think I'm sure you're right that there may be difficulties.
I was forgetting the mic, sorry. I've got 2 members of staff myself that go out and give benefits advice, because my team's not only a finance team, it's a benefits advice team. We've got the social care system flow, and that records any instances that we know of or social workers know of where clients could present a potential threat to staff, and then my staff would go in and review that before they do a benefits advice referral or housing benefits referral, just to make sure whether they should go alone or they should go as a pair or whether they should not attend at all. So we have actually got that in place, but that's locally. So just to maybe help you or guide you.
You mean just within?
Flow is limited to social care staff.
Right, but it would be possible to explore.
It might be, obviously, Flow holds other potential information that us as data controllers, if you like, in terms of Data Protection Act compliance. We've just got to be aware of restrictions around our read-only for specific things, but it may help then to develop or look at a system that can maybe mirror that. But that's certainly something that's been helpful for us, because there's been instances where I've had to say to staff, you can't go out, I've had to go and attend with them as a manager, because they have come up as a red, it comes up as a red amber alert, and I've had to say with the red ones, I'll go and attend, just because of the very nature of what the social worker or the other people have fed back onto the system.
So we should, so Penny, shall we?
I was just saying, yes, that's an area of good practice that we could perhaps recommend, because the people who are going to access it are a similar vein to Tyrone. They're exactly the same, level and in the same area. It's not us. We don't have to access it. So I can't see that there would be a problem once they've gone through the certain, tests or whatever.
We've also got the same need of care for people or firms or companies which provide services for our social services, basically, because there has been instance I know of somebody at Crossroads going out to see somebody, and they were seriously assaulted. So you've also got these people are trying to create their own register as well, but it's the intelligence that's coming from these people, this sort of firms, and that which would form our database.
Can I suggest that we don't try and define the system now? That we and it may have to, as it were, leave it to Wendy, Hazel, and myself to work out some sensible wording. But what we're looking for is we would like to see such a system, or if it already exists, the exploration to be done of in what ways it might be extended to include the people who've spoken to us here today, and more widely still, the volunteer. Yeah. In other words, corporate warning and corporate warning protection, and what information can properly be shared. I think have I missed anything? I think that's it, isn't it, for our recommendations? So if you're happy with that, Wendy Hazel and I will work up some wording which can be communicated to officers so that they know the outcome of their appearance this morning, but it will also form the basis of a letter to the Cabinet. And while we're about it, Ty, perhaps you had better join the joining up meeting. If you've got people going out doing benefits advice, would you be willing to do that?
Yes, I would. We've already been working with Richard anyway, so I'm quite familiar with Richard. So yeah, I can drop Richard a line and certainly invite myself. No, I don't mind inviting myself along. That's fine.
And then we'll do an appeal across the county for the county council for any other department which is providing a benefits or other or similar information and advice service. And every inquiry makes the same recommendation.
Absolutely, and it doesn't happen.
Those are of the sort of what did you know and what did you do and all of that. This is similar but not quite the same, is it? This is about giving a heads up, particularly to a lone member of staff who might be going into a dangerous situation. But you're right, the general point about agencies' willingness to share is well made. I think we've covered it. I think we've had a very useful discussion with our witnesses. I would suggest that we now move to item 6 and ask Tyrone to take us into the paperwork, which, remember, as he will, I'm sure, tell us, reflects a particular point in time which we've now passed.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to say good morning, but looking at the time, I'd have to say
good afternoon, Ty, and thank you for coming.
I just thought the shivering was anticipation of this lengthy finance report that I always present. I do. But with the report, starts at page 27. I'll just take you to the more salient points of the report that I'd like to draw your attention to, information that you might like to either note or you might like to ask further questions about. If I take to page 27, the purpose, it is, as the Chair has highlighted, it is a snapshot point in time. It was taken at month 2 for the financial outturn for the budget that sit under the Adult Select portfolio. I have to apologise. We had every intention of sending this information before the summer recess. So we should have had it slightly earlier than what you are having it presented to you today. If I look at the outturn on page 28 for the Social Care and Health Directorate, that's exhibiting a £1.1 million overspend at month 2. I'd like to stress again, with month 2, it is only looking at 2 months worth of actual data, so we've had to estimate 10 months, so there are a number of assumptions we've had to make in compiling that data. But with the area of Adult Select, given the very nature of adult services, that can be as short as only 4 weeks worth of actual expenditure and 48 weeks worth of estimations. So we just bear that in mind in looking and considering the figures. More specifically to the portfolio budget that sit under Adult Select, the overspend position for that is £462,000, which is going to be of more interest to yourselves. If I take you to page 28, page 20, at the bottom of page 28, sorry, the overall forecast position for the authority is an overspend of 1.368 million as at month 2. If I look more specifically at the variances that make up the £462,000 overspend for Adult Select budget, they are detailed on page 30, 31 and 32 for your consideration, and I'm happy to take any questions on any of those variances that draw your attention or you would like further information on. On page 30 is also the director's commentary as well for you to consider as well. That's all of the revenue information. We have got a very small capital budget within Adult Select. We don't pay a big part of the capital programme. We've got a current budget of £92,000. That's detailed on page 40. Is all around routine maintenance in Mardy Park and Senville, electrical lighting systems, boiler maintenance, so on and so forth. And of that £92,000 budget that's been put aside, we're on track to spend that. No issues have been brought to my attention that I need to alert you to as members. In terms of existing savings that we have to make out of the adult budget, that's detailed on page 47 and 49. On page 47, we've got a mandate number A24, which has got savings of £12,000, and we're on track to make that. There's no issues. On page 49, we've got a more significant saving this year of £628,000, which is mandate A34 on practice change. I'd just like to draw your attention to the colour scheme, and that's been coloured as amber because of the £462,000 overspend that we currently got at month 2. When you do look at the variances, we've got one significant variance, and that's an overspend in the Chepstow adult team of £534,000. So that's why we've highlighted that 628k mandate as amber, because of the risk at month 2, or the small risk that may not be achieved. I know it's quick, a quick whistle-top story, if you like, of month 2. I'm happy to take any questions or elaborate on any of the points that you'd like me to elaborate on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ty. Questions from members, please? Councillor Harris, sorry.
Basically, Ty, is there anything we should be really, I know it's only month 2, is there anything we should be really worried about, or the sort of concerns in here are sort of normal that we will be seeing at this time, or is there anything slightly abnormal creeping in?
In terms of month 2, it's always a difficult one because you've got very limited data and it's so early in the year, but it is trying to bring up any major issues that we want to bring to your attention. What I'd like to draw your attention to is the variances on page 30 to page 32, and if I more specifically draw your attention to, I'm quickly going down myself, to the bottom half of page 31, and that's the significant overspend in the Chepstow adult team of £535,000. I've just recently completed the month 5 forecast, and even though Chepstow's come down slightly, it is still hovering around the £500,000 overspend mark. So that's one I would like to bring members' attention to, because now we're into month 5, it's still exhibiting the same level of overspend. So that's the one I would say is of concern, because that then has a direct impact on whether we can meet our 628k mandate saving A34, which I've highlighted on page 49. In terms of that, we are looking at a budget recovery plan from the team manager and service manager within that area to see if we can take any mitigating actions at month 5 to see if we can address that within this financial year, or if there's anything we're looking at to produce savings for next year, whether we can pull our work forward into this financial year to try and alleviate the pressure that that team is having on the bottom line.
Thank you.
Yes, it was mentioned at one of the recent meetings that a care home is going to close. Now, this will have a significant impact in some way. Would it be entirely detrimental, do you think? Would it add to your burden?
You are right. There is a care home that's got a significant number of our clients just over the border, even though it's in Gloucestershire, it's just over the border in Chepstow. Without naming the name, you can mostly work it out yourself. We are actively looking now for placements. They've given us 3 months notice. I think we're already into 1 month of that notice. We're looking at obviously areas that within the county that can take those placements. Some of those are high-end EMI placements, which we always have difficulty in trying to fill. And that home was really good to us, provide us with an opportunity where we could expand placements just short of the border, just over the border, but not too far away. Looking at the contract price, we have got a fair fee, and that home did accept our fair fee. And that's what we're looking at, is whether we can place like for like. So we're hopeful that it wouldn't be a financial burden, but I can't rule that out at this stage.
I think it's unfortunate, and I think we should say it. Well, I would like to say I think it's unfortunate. I hope colleagues will agree that we actually haven't got an officer here responsible for this area of work to give us an explanation. We recognise that actually, Ty, you've given us a perfectly credible and helpful answer, but I've said the same in other committees. I don't think you should be expected to answer some of the points. The fact that you've done so is appreciated, but doesn't justify the absence of officers. But we've got a sense in which there are particular difficulties in the Chepstow area, and it's not just this, it's also Seven View. And I hope, by the way, that the maintenance budget at Seven View is able to provide for a repainting of the gates by the fire station, because they are in a shocking state. But in all seriousness, there are clearly some issues there that we might want to know about. Main overspend within the staffing budget due to cover for rota. I don't quite understand that. Do you?
If I expand on the Seven View one, is covering sickness with bank staff and asking our own staff to work extra shifts for those people that are sick but are rostered to work. So that's exhibiting a pressure. But also within Seven View, I'd just like to remind members of a mandate that came up 2 years ago that was looking at reducing the bank holiday entitlement for staff. We have 2 bank holidays on a Tuesday, one at Easter and one at Christmas, I think. And I was supposed to negotiate to try and reduce that Tuesday so we didn't have to give additional payments for staff working on those Tuesday holidays. That hasn't happened yet, but the saving was still taken off the budget. Because it had to be taken off staffing, those budgets that took a significant hit were the direct services budget, such as Seven View and our in-house home care service. I think Seven View was supporting £50,000 worth of those savings. So you have to consider of that £100,000 pressure that they've got, £50,000 was a budget cut 2 years ago that we have to try and find alternative mitigating actions to try and meet. I do appreciate your comment around more senior officers being here to answer your questions, but in terms of that care home closing, if you would like a more fuller answer, I have got a bit more detailed knowledge on that. If you did want me to go into a little bit more detail on that around the reasons for the closure, if that would help. That is right. No, it is a care home in England. It's a privately run care home, and we are doing everything we can to make sure we safeguard those clients. So there will be suitable like-for-like alternative accommodation provided for them within the 3-month notice period.
Thank you. I think members will be satisfied with that. And the other reason we need to be cautious about what we say is, of course, this is a private sector provider. This may well happen again. There are always risks of this sort. Our comfort comes from understanding that our officers are aware and are working to mitigate the difficulties. Are you happy with that? Are there any other questions for Ty? Councillor Wintle.
It's not so much a question. It's I see on page 29, item 316. You know, it's a nice chapter there, which basically reflects the statements you've made. You know, things. The fact that it's based on 2 months active data and 10 months estimated data. So, you know, that's basically is what we've been saying about it in the past. All this sort of data comes back at the beginning of the year. It's expenditure, and then it's sort of tapered out over the complete year. And some of the things which probably overspent now would be, like you say, clawed back over the year. The only bit of concern I had, but it has nothing to do with us, is schools. It says schools are also forecasting to use most of their reserves by the end of the year, which is rather worrying. But as I said, it's nothing to do with this committee, but you know, they've got problems that we haven't, thank goodness.
You're right. I mean,
Yeah, you'll get another one. I think it's November time. It'll certainly be before Christmas, which will be the month 6 position. What we've been asked to do as officers is to do a month 5 to see if anything comes out that we need to report to you, a variation from month 2. The month 5, from where I'm coming from, we haven't got a lot really to bring attention to. We'll leave that now ready for month 6. But like Councillor Wintle says, yeah, month 2 is just to give you an early flavour of any really big alerts you need to be aware of. But we have got 10 months when that snapshot was taken to take any mitigating action to try and alleviate. So the position could very well change month 6 to month 9 and may not look nothing like the position you're seeing today.
Yes. And having said that then, and having made the observation that it's a pity officers aren't here, nevertheless we do have confidence that the service managers and you and whoever else needs to be involved are already addressing those issues. We do have that comfort, but we will be probably wanting to pick this up again, these particular examples, in the context of the next report. Are you then satisfied, members, that we have, if not grilled or even lightly toasted Tyrone, that we can let him go? You do a good job. We've said this before with these reports, which we appreciate. They are readable, they are comprehensive, and they're very valuable. And Delia has a comment or question.
The community coordinators that we had in down in the south and one in Abergavenny, have their contracts now been made permanent? And also, are you in a position to know whether the 2 additional ones for the other parts of Abergavenny, Monmouth, have they been appointed yet? I wonder if you know the situation.
I've got limited knowledge of that. In terms of the funding, that was funded by reserve funding. What we've done now, we've switched the funding over. We've made a bid into the intermediate care fund to try and max out the grant entitlement, from the Welsh Government, where they're giving this £15 million out, and then an additional 15 million for intermediate care fund. That's administered by Health. We've made bids to fund community coordination. In terms of that funding stream, that can't be classed as a permanent funding stream. It is only a temporary funding stream. So those contracts are of a temporary.
So they're still temporary.
They are of a temporary nature. We have still got some vacancies that will be filled. I think last estimate date I got, we should have everybody in post November, no later than December time.
And that will be Monmouth and which is the other one?
Yeah, Chepstow. Yeah, that's right. So you'll have the same complement in the north and in the south. I think is 2 volunteer coordinators north and south, and 2 community community coordinator north and south as well.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much.
Help you?
Yes. Thank you. I just wondered what the situation was.
It is just purely around that funding stream because we want to tap in. What I'm always keen to do is maximise grant entitlement. I don't want to send any money back to Welsh Government. I don't want to just use it and waste it, but where I can use it to make significant difference, I'd rather use grant funding than revenue funding to alleviate the impact or further overspend on the bottom line.
Right. Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. So can we conclude that item? Thank you very much, Ty. Very quickly, anything to draw attention to in the forward work programme? I've got one question, but you know what that is already. Well, Hazel's going to take us into the work programme. Anything you want to say about the work programme?
Did you mean the Gwent Frailty meeting, or did you mean the scrutiny with the health board? Yes. I've just checked my emails and I offered them 6 dates through November and they can't do any of them. So I'm really sorry, but I've just come back from holiday and I will ask Democratic Services to give us some new dates and I'll be back in touch with the health board. But it looks like it's not going to be before then. It's likely to be December, if we're lucky, maybe January. That is a shame because there are people that we would like to involve in this meeting, people who contributed through the carer strategy, and at the moment I'm not able to give anybody any indication of dates, but as soon as we can finalise a date, I will let everybody know.
I think that from Hazel, I've seen the correspondence myself. And one of the things we might need to do is to make it clear to them that we're not necessarily expecting the entire board to come along in a charabanc. We want people who can answer the questions that we will have. And we've already outlined most of the territory that will cover.
I have done that already.
Yes. You wouldn't believe how much time Hazel spends just on trying to get this particular meeting together, let alone any of the others. And in fact, I think we may need to have a raiding party to Caerleon and see if we can get some better information there. We've done that before. Well, there may be some need for clarification. If they can't, I find it very strange that nobody can manage any of the dates that have been offered. That does strike me as being worth questioning. So, with regard to the rest of our forward work programme that is set out before you, the question I had was, and I think I know the answer, but the question is there any progress yet on our date for going to prison?
The answer's no, Chair. As I went on holiday, I left it with Bernard to liaise with the prison service to find an appropriate date. I think they were thinking that we might be too many in number to all go together. What I suggested was if we could do it on a particular day and perhaps stage, the sort of numbers an hour later or so on. So I will let you know as soon as possible. The other date that we need to inform members of is the date for the joint frailty meeting. You might recall many moons ago, Wales Audit Office did a report on the Gwent Frailty Programme, and they produced a report which is now approximately a year since its finalisation. And it's taken this long to try and secure a date whereby the Gwent councils could meet together to enable the Wales Audit Office to only present that report once. It was suggested that they come to each scrutiny committee, but they preferred to present to you all, and the difficulty has been in terms of securing a date when all are available. And that leads me on to the next point, which is it's not a particularly popular day. I shall just find the date, Chair, but I believe it's a Friday and it's an afternoon. 21st of October, Councillor.
Is it the 21st?
Yeah. Yeah.
So are we all expected to go?
You're all invited to go, Chair. You don't all have to go, but you're all invited to go. It's in Penalta House, which is Penalta House. That's Tredommen. That's Caerphilly County Council offices, because it's the only venue that's big enough to hold all the members of the Gwent councils. So I would send you all the details, but it's Tredommen, Penalta House. So it's Caerphilly. Sorry?
And as you make your decision, don't think about the cost of bringing all of these committees together in that place. But the audit office are going to pay for it, aren't they?
I don't believe so.
Right.
Yeah, they do have
It's
a lovely
Friday the
restaurant
21st,
there and cafe and lots of facilities. So
Yeah, it's not in my diary.
We think it's Friday.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the 31st.
We
It's
think-
Friday the 21st of October.
All right.
And you will be sent an agenda, and before that I will email all the committee members with the date and the details and the postcode and so forth. But you will need to bear in mind that that report will be quite out of date by that time. And obviously there might be a suggestion at that meeting that you would like to undertake joint scrutiny of Gwent Frailty Programme. That's a matter for you to decide.
when did you say the date was? Friday the 21st? Yes. Yes, that's what I've got. Yeah.
The next ordinary meeting is on the 8th of November.
Yep.
But we did agree that we would possibly hold a special meeting in October should we need to, and we set a date for that of the 31st of October.
Can I just point out, please, Chair, that I think that's half term. So I'm just saying that because people are bound by grandparent duties or parent duties. So it's not the best date.
No.
When on the 31st? There's two of us at least on the planning committee.
Democratic Services suggested the date, so it would obviously have been not when planning committee's on. They suggested the dates. Democratic Services give me dates to offer to you. So if they offered that date, they would have made sure it didn't clash with planning committee.
It's not committee, it's site visits.
Site visits, okay. But are you saying that that's not a good day anyway?
It's all right if it's in the afternoon.
I think the agenda for that meeting would be quite important because we're looking at the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, Part 11. So if it's looking like a date that's not suitable for you, I think it would be better to rearrange it.
One possibility could be, Hazel, that we look at the November dates that were offered to the Health Board that they can't do, but which we thought we would be able to manage. So we won't actually confirm a date immediately, I think, but we're going to have to let you know as soon as possible. I do apologise for this, but we struggle with the need to get engagement with others. So I would suggest we take one of the November dates that we offered to the Health Board.
To give you those?
Well, yeah. Do you want to do it now? We could, if we could do it now.
Right, dates that we put to the Health Board were Tuesday the 22nd of November at 10, Wednesday the 23rd of November, the following day at 10, the Thursday the 24th at 2, or the 29th of November at 2. That might be a good one because I think the officers would like to consider the issues earlier rather than later.
22nd. Now, we talk about loan working. Does that give you enough opportunity to pull things together for a meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So that's the next date.
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock on the 22nd of November. So we will have that. We will build around that date for a November meeting. We still leave unresolved the prison visit, and we leave unresolved the Inarian Bevan visit. We can't do any more on that today. We just have to let you know what we can achieve. As far as item 7 is concerned, then on the forward work programme, is everybody content? And finally, are there any things on the Cabinet and Council work planner that members have noticed and wish to raise? I didn't find anything, but that doesn't mean to say that there isn't anything. I'm just looking to see what date did they tell us that what we talked about this morning was going up? November?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't see that.
No, I haven't got there yet. Sorry. It's all the...
Oh yeah, discretionary housing payments. Yes.
Where's that?
It's a... There you go.
Oh yes.
Got it.
Yeah, I couldn't read the date. Is it the
It's because the page number's over the
2nd
top.
of November.
2nd of November? Right. Are we content? Can I thank you all for your contributions this morning, for staying the course? Councillor Smith, as always, you watch us in our deliberations, and I declare the meeting closed.
I'm just writing up a conclusion for that DHP, so if you could agree it, then I can send it to you for a letter and send it to the the officers and know what we want.
Can